Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us. Our GGV Evolving E Masterclass. This is the third masterclass have done in this virtual world. We're really thrilled to have Philippe and Skyler with us from Tatari. I'm going to turn it over to Robin to give a brief overview of GGV Capital and the Tatari team, and then we'll run through the Tatari presentation. And again, Q&A is open throughout the entire presentation, so feel free to submit questions throughout the duration of the presentation, and we'll do our best to answer all of them at the end. So I'm just going to share my screen quickly. Great, Robin, over to you.
Thank you, Liza, and thanks everyone for joining today. We're going to give a brief intro about GGV here. I've been with GGV personally for about 6.5 years, but GGV was established actually nearly 2 decades ago in Singapore and Silicon Valley, and we provide multi-stage investments to globally minded business founders. And so in the past 20 years, we have accumulated about 6.2 billion assets under management, and you can see here some of our star portfolio are listed, and we have over 60 unicorns now, 42 are homegrown. I actually sit in New York, but we have offices in San Francisco where Liza is, Menlo Park, Beijing, Shanghai, and Singapore. And today, we continue to expand our global footprint with investment roadmaps across US, Latin America, Israel, Southeast Asia, China, and India. And we're now on kind of the 7th fund that we're investing out of right now, and with 5 billion, raised in this decade alone. And we're really excited to have Tatari here today. They've worked with a number of our portfolio, including Opera, Poshmark, House, Boxed, PlushCare, Ibotta, many of which have said really great things about both Skyler and Philippe. So really wanted to host this masterclass because we are seeing a lot of trends, particularly now with COVID. Everyone is at home and turning to streaming and turning to TV. And so how can we best leverage this going forward? And so I'm going to turn it over to the Tatari team.
Awesome. Thank you, Robin. Thank you, Liza. I will fire up my screen share now. Please confirm once you can see my screen.
Will do.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yes.
Awesome. You guys should see my screen now.
Yep.
Cool.
Ready to go.
Let's go ahead and get started. First and foremost, thank you, GGV, for hosting us and putting this all together. We really appreciate the invite, and it's an honor to do this together. With that being said, I'd like to welcome everyone to the GGV and Tatari Masterclass, where we will be educating you all on how to get started on streaming TV and drive user acquisition at scale. Here's the agenda for our time together. It looks like a lot, but I promise you we will whip through it quickly, and we will have plenty of time for questions at the end. Let's start off with introductions. I'll let Philippe introduce himself first.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. It's wonderful meeting you over this webinar. Dialed in here from San Francisco with a new logo kind of quickly put together by my daughters. And so my accent is Belgium and CEO, one of the founders in Tatari. It says there my favorite TV show is Breaking Bad. Finally, so much late, but finally I got to watching the show. I love it. I'm halfway season number 3. And actually a question I will have for you back is, if anybody has seen the entire season, let me know if I should carry on. I have a short attention span. I'm already thinking of my next show, but if you think I really should see it beyond the 3rd season, I'd love to find out. And so that's me, and back to Skyler.
Awesome. Thanks, Philippe. Hi, everyone. I'm Skyler. I was the first employee at Tatari 4 years ago, and I'm the head of sales here. I'm from Ojai, California, which is just north of LA. I currently live and work in Santa Monica. My favorite TV show is Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee. For those of you who don't know Tatari well, we were founded in 2016. We're 70 people strong, mostly engineers and data scientists. We have offices in San Francisco, LA, and New York City, and we have over 100 clients today across a wide range of industries. When thinking of Tatari, it's best to not think of us as a media agency. We're a data and analytics company, and we focus solely on the buying and measurement of TV and streaming ads. Here's a few of the companies that we work with. What I'm most proud of is that about half of our clients were completely new to TV. With small budgets, we held their hand and introduced them to TV, and we guided them to scale. Some of these clients have scaled TV advertising to the tune of 50 million plus per year with confidence all along the way. The IB recently published a list on the top 250 companies to watch out for in 2020. And out of those brands that do TV advertising, nearly 50% of them are Tatari clients. That's pretty sweet. So let's talk about why brands choose to work with Tatari. It's quite simple. We have turned TV advertising into a digital-like experience. With Tatari, TV is very much online. It's measured, it's timely, it's transparent, and you can test small and scale big. Let me give you the lay of the land of the TV advertising industry today. TV is not dying. TV is alive and well. Here are a few stats to prove it. People spend more time consuming content on their TV than on their phones on a daily basis. Streaming TV is real and it's growing quickly. 30% of TV consumption is actually streamed. And 90% of US adults can be reached on connected TVs. TV advertising has evolved a ton. It no longer suffers from the stigma that it once did. Let's start with creative. It no longer costs you $500K to produce a TV spot. Today, you can get a batch of creatives with multiple concepts that you're proud of for as little as $50K. And we can quickly see which creative concepts are your champions, and we simply drop the losers. You can see here on the slide, this actually shows that Tatari identified the champions, we spend more on the champions, and we drop the losers quickly. Entry cost. TV is no longer just a big brand privilege like the traditional media agencies have always made it. For Philippe, when he tried out TV advertising while running TrueCar, the minimum pilot budget he had to commit to was a cool $3 million. At Tatari, we can get you fired up on TV with as little as 50 to 100K. So you can see here on the slide, this advertiser launched, they spent $103,000 their first month on TV. Media pricing. As a Tatari client, there's total transparency in your campaign. You know exactly what we're buying, why we're buying it, and what rate we paid. It's not a black box. In fact, you approve all of your buys before we send them out. Oh, and we like to save you money too, which we even show you in the dashboard here on the right side. You can see the savings that we made for you, and we publish that. Measurement has came a long way as well. At Tatari, we don't use GRPs because they're old school and the math doesn't make much sense. How can showing one person an ad 1 million times equal 1 GRP? While showing the ad once to 1 million people also equals 1 GRP. For this reason, GRPs are out the window. For our clients, we measure outcomes such as cost per install, cost per sale, and any other KPI they want measured. These metrics, they feel very similar to your digital campaigns. Take a look here. You can see that feels like digital. Let's talk about how we measure TV advertising. We measure TV using a few different models. We use baseline plus lift to measure the immediate responders from a linear cable TV ad. This model is great for understanding how many visitors were going to be on your site if the TV ad did not air. Then the TV ad airs and we attribute the spike above the freshly calculated baseline to the ad that just aired. I'm making baseline plus lift sound very simple, but there's a handful of things we do differently that makes all the difference in perfecting baseline plus lift. Now, not all the visitors come right away after seeing a TV ad. Some visitors come later. To measure the delayed visitors, we do a closed loop analysis on the IP addresses that we buy from the smart TV manufacturers. These data sets are pathetically expensive, but they're super valuable because they show us all the IP addresses of their customers, plus all the ads that they were served throughout the day while watching TV. With that data, we draw these maturation curves shown here on the graph. On the x-axis, it's the time since the ad was exposed to the household. On the left y-axis, it's the probability that they will respond to the ad. In the first few minutes here, you see that it spikes up vertically. Those are your immediate responders. And as time goes on, it keeps going up and up and up and up. Those are your delayed visitors coming to your site. Tatari takes great pride in incrementality in our measurement. So we report back the view through measurement in purple, but we also show you the incremental view as well, which is the line in blue there. You can see there's a big difference. For streaming TV, baseline plus lift is out the window as it's all on-demand viewing. For streaming, we again use our closed loop analysis on the IP addresses, except in streaming TV, we get 100% of the IPs sent back to us from every single streaming publisher that we buy from. I'm going to take a sip of my tequila now, and Philippe will take the wheel for a bit from here.
I think it will help if I unmute. It's cool. So obviously we're going to talk a little bit more about TV and how to get started, because I think that's really what's of interest here. But I do think it's good to take like a 1 minute pause and highlight what's happening in the market due to coronavirus. And so the first thing I'm sure you have heard of is that viewership is up, and you can see a lot of numbers on your screen. I'm not going to read them out, but no matter how you look at it, more people watch more TV, more hours at any times of the day. Even kids programming. If you look at some of the kind of like the kids traditional cable networks, they will be up 2x. Streaming TV in particular has gotten a lot of wind in the sails in these last 2 months. So you could almost argue if linear is up, right, cable and broadcast, then streaming is even up more. And you know, many people even kind of see it as a tipping point where, you know, streaming will overtake linear. So that's one thing. And of course, as an advertiser, that's great because your audiences are much larger. The other thing that has happened is pricing. And so maybe Skyler, if you can jump to the next slide, please. Thank you. So on the one hand, we've seen a lot of advertisers who had to abruptly pull out of the market, right? If you're a travel company, you don't want your ads to be running on TV right now. We saw a lot of advertisers just canceling on some of what they call the upfront orders, kind of these long-term committed orders that they had in the market. The upfronts for later this year were outright canceled, or at least they didn't take place. So there's a lot of kind of like inventory unsold, which usually would have been committed already. And then to kind of add insult to injury, you all know sports just evaporated like that. So if you're a sports broadcaster, all of a sudden, all these programs that you had to swap them out with something else. And worse, all the ad inventory that was connected to it kind of had to resell. You put it all together, pricing cratered. I mean, 80, 90% off, and that's across linear and streaming. And it was almost a perfect storm, right? Lower pricing, higher viewership. And so if we kind of look across the Tatari client roster, pretty much everybody actually increased their investment with great success over the last 8 weeks. I'm just picking one example here, and then there's so many more. The NFL draft. The NFL draft just about 2 weeks ago was the only kind of live televised sports event. And networks just kind of went into this not knowing what to expect, and using the data that we have from smart TVs and set-top boxes, we were able to project a much higher viewership, and then also kind of use it in a borderline arbitrage style to negotiate a better pricing. So net, our clients came to some of these types of programs, bought into it with DR-like pricing, and truly drove brand campaigns, which usually would easily cost kind of like 2 or 3 times more. So as strange or as absurd as it may sound, TV advertising has been incredibly good for our clients. So that's something it's good to know. I personally think this situation will last a little longer as kind of these shelter-in-place restrictions will roll back, viewership will taper off, potentially even abruptly, right? People want to get out of the house. The media markets themselves will remain in turmoil for the foreseeable few months. And I think, of course, that's something to potentially, I won't say take advantage of, but to use to your benefit. So let's talk a little bit about streaming TV. It's kind of back to the topic. And when people think about streaming TV, there's still kind of that misconception of, oh, it's the consumption of TV contents and programs on all devices, especially mobile and tablets and PC. And that's actually not true. The vast majority of streaming experiences are still kind of these full episode flagship-like programming. The vast majorities of these impressions and viewing experiences are still on the flat screen, lean back, casual setting in the living room. If you ask, for example, Hulu, they will report that over 85% of their viewership is on that flat screen. I also sense when talking with people kind of who are new to TV that streaming TV seems to be limited to Hulu or maybe Hulu and Roku. Let me tell you, there are hundreds, if not thousands of what I would call quality publishers out there. Obviously, there are the pure OTT services, over the top connections, right? Some think of it as a subscription service. Some of them with funky names, but meaningful, right? The Tubi TV or Pluto TV, do not underestimate them. They will easily drive 10 to 20 million viewers on a monthly basis. And then, of course, there are all the cable networks. All the cable networks, they're not sitting there letting the world go to an end. They just rebroadcast a cable signal via IP into streaming TV, which you then will receive via, let's say, your Roku box or Apple TV. So there's a lot of streaming content, great streaming content, I must say. And of course, as widely written up in the press and all research, streaming TV comes with this promise of a better understanding of the data around it, the audience, the demographics, the psychographics, and some of the kind of the ways in which we then can also tap into it. Alas, I wouldn't say misconception around streaming, but the thing that I hear a lot is that, oh, streaming is just kind of young people, maybe single people, they don't watch cable anymore, and that's actually not true. So here kind of have an age breakdown for some of these flagship streaming publishers, and you can quickly see the great variety. Some of these streaming publishers, the majority of their audience is actually over 50. Who would have thought? Same holds for household incomes. It's really across the board. And so really what I'm trying to say here is that you can find any audience in streaming. Please do not see it as kind of like the unique cord cutter young demographic. It couldn't be more wrong. So that's kind of on the streaming landscape, what you can buy into, which then leads into, okay, how do you get started, right? And this may be the most interesting. So let's kind of answer that question a little bit in the context of history, recent history. Just 5 years ago, and this was my personal experience. How do you start TV? Well, put a lot of money on the table. Back then, right, there was no streaming, but kind of the same concept. That's how publishers, you pick networks, you throw a lot of money at each network, and you pray, and you hope that something will stick. And of course, this is one of the reasons Tatari came to the market, right? Out of this very personal experience, we can change this, right? And so one of the things that we started doing years ago already was just very simply, look, why don't we not only test in small doses, and Skyler already talked about that, but how do we kind of bring and inject a little pedigree of digital in it? So one of the things, for example, amongst others, that we would do is do correlation on set-top box data and demographics, and then intelligently target the more correlating networks and rotations back to the target audiences. And so that's good. But of course, where we are today with streaming, there's so much more we can do. And it kind of dovetails into this concept of programmatic streaming. I'm sure you've heard all about programmatic streaming. It's still a narrow sliver of the market, and we'll talk more about it in a second. But of course, it comes with above anything else with rich data, a lot of third-party data, demographic data, psychographic data, potentially also with first-party data. And so what you can do with that is really, with just $1,000, try a very particular, let's say, demographics left and right, or run a run-of-site campaign and read back what types of demographics you get back, and really sharpen the pencil much faster at a much lower cost. And so these performance optimizations can go super fast. So here's an example from movements. And so what you see here on this slide is kind of a week by week overview of their performance. Performance measured as the deviation from their customer acquisition cost, right? And so anybody looking at this will say, okay, great. Well, you started in week 1, you could argue without optimization, so you're awfully off. And then, of course, you improved down to half of what they wanted. And then you can do this, right, by selecting the right creative, the better publishers, day parts, you name it. What's possibly even more insightful is that when you start, and this is movement, this is real data, they started with $25,000 in that first week. As we did that performance optimization, we also optimized on scale. And so by the time we're in week 6, investment or spend is running 8x. And that's really, really cool. And so I want to make sure that as you think about TV and as you get into TV and you start with streaming, it's really good to kind of have those optimizations, OKRs or goals in mind, but always remember the ultimate reason why you do TV is to drive scale, right? The ability to drive huge amounts of money in a channel with a certain performance. And so this actually then comes back to, well, where do you go from there? Because even if the world is changing, even if we know that linear TV as it exists today may not be there in 5 years from today, right? But the reality today is that the scale, the vast majority of the dollars still live in linear TV. It's about 10 to 90%. And so ultimately, it's good to start on streaming, but you're gonna have to move into linear, right? Streaming obviously taps you, it kind of gets you an audience, and they're gonna be mostly those cord cutters. There's not that much overlap necessarily. And surely, as I mentioned before, you can start with smaller investments, and you can do these types of deep targeting and maybe run some very complex types of campaigns. But to drive scale, to bring a campaign above $5 million, $10 million, linear is going to be part of your portfolio. And of course, if once you kind of get into that world, then you get into that scary reality of brand advertising. So let's spend a moment on this. And you know, for those who haven't done TV yet, you're still far away from it, but it's good to paint the picture. Where will you or should you eventually end up? And actually the best way, I always explain this, is by the Super Bowl ad. It's not that necessarily argue or make the case here for buying Super Bowl ads, but what happens when you do this? Well, obviously you pay a lot of money, $5 million or so, and you get your 30-second airing or impression during the game. But what else do you get? Well, first of all, you get the largest TV audience in one fell swoop, 150 million people, just like that. And by the way, a lot of co-viewing in there. Second thing is you get a very captive audience. Reality is such that, you know, guys like me probably watch the game more for the ads than the game itself, right? And so people pay attention to the ads. They don't necessarily run away or tune out. You can also, in a big event like the Super Bowl, signal quality, signal prestige, because all of a sudden you're kind of running next to some of the bigger players, right? The Coca-Colas, the Progressives of this world. And then last but not least, the Super Bowl comes with a lot of social media amplification, great memorability. I mean, today we are still talking about some of the Super Bowl ads we saw maybe as much as 10 years ago. And so what I'm trying to say here is, in those types of brand airings, it's so much more than that direct response performance, but it's the true halo effect of TV that can start kicking in. And by the way, like there is kind of like quantitative evidence of that, right? All of a sudden, certain keywords on Google that weren't profitable will start becoming profitable. Click-through rates in Facebook may start edging up. And so TV advertising really is a journey. And Skyler, if you don't mind skipping to the next slide, thank you. It's really a journey where you go from a performance optimization, and streaming is a wonderful start, into scaling, probably start layering in linear, ultimately into brand advertising. And the metrics and the tools that you will use for both planning and measuring will change. We don't have enough time today, but as you kind of move to the right, you're going to start looking back again into some of the oldest metrics of TV advertising, reach and frequency. But we're going to look at them through a digital lens, right? We're going to use IP level data to put that all together. And for the people on the call who maybe are already in TV advertising, and that's probably the part that would interest you most, we can definitely schedule a separate follow-up. So that's the big picture. I'd love to actually bring it back down a little bit more tactical now, hand it over to Skyler and talk a little about creative, because I actually noticed that's one of the questions that we have in there. Does Tatari help with creative? So Skyler, you take it from here.
Awesome. Thank you, Philippe. Creative is a super powerful lever in running a strong TV campaign. Tatari does not produce creative, but the first order of business for all clients is that we run them through our creative performance playbook that shows them exactly what makes a performing TV ad. We have 100 plus clients, hundreds of millions of dollars flowing through us every year. So we have a feedback loop that shows us what performs on TV that production shops just don't have. I'll share a few components that make a performing TV ad. For example, simple works. Do not overwhelm the viewer. Tell them a value prop and gently point them to your website. Have 2 to 3 concepts that are wildly different from each other. Test different actors, test different value props, test different lengths, test different emotions. Do not test spots that are pretty much the same in nature. That's a pointless test. Creative testing never stops. This is from a presentation that we did on the big stage with Turo at MAU Growth in Las Vegas last year. The dotted yellow line is Turo's average cost per install. The other colored lines are creatives that we were testing. As you can see, we found a champion in the purple line, which was the in-card download the app today. And that's what Tatari doubled down on for Turo. For those who want to learn more about streaming TV, we put together this rich streaming guide for you to check out. This link on the screen will take you right to it. I'll allow you a moment to write it down. But yeah, there's tons of great information there. Now, let's open it up for questions. We could take a look and see what other questions are there. And between Philippe and I, someone will answer it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That was wonderful. We've had questions come in from the audience, so I'm going to read them aloud, and then you guys can take it away and answer. And for everyone else who's on the call, feel free to submit questions in the Q&A box, and we'll answer them live. So the first question is, how much control do we have over performance? Are the CPMs dynamic? Are CPMs the only pricing model?
Philippe, go ahead.
There's a lot of layers in that question, but so control over performance comes by having the ability to measure as well as manipulate the levers that are at your disposal, right? So the most obvious ones, whether it's linear or streaming TV, are things like networks and publishers, day parts or daytimes, or in linear TV mostly referred to as rotations. And then last but not least, creatives. I mean, I always say that a great creative will outperform a good creative, right? And so depending, so CPMs do vary, right? Because, you know, one publisher will be cheaper or more expensive than the other. One day part, right? And a CNN primetime day part will cost 10x that of an overnight, right? And so CPM is definitely variable. But of course, you know, a high CPM doesn't necessarily mean a bad outcome, right? Somebody's Super Bowl ad at course, I forgot the going CPMs now, but let's say $50 CPM could have a fantastic outcome, right? Or a high CPM, because it's deeply targeted and programmatic streaming, could have a much better outcome than a low CPM because of the virtue of targeting. So I'm not sure that fully answered the question, but at least I think it does based on how I understood it. Happy to kind of add more to it.
Great. Big question. Why would I use Tatari over existing channels like Facebook, etc.?
I don't think you should use Tatari over Facebook. I think you should use Facebook and Tatari and any other channels at your disposal, for sure. I think digital advertising or digital customer acquisition kind of lends itself better to these early stages. I mean, all of us on this call can start a Google AdWords campaign for $1. That's all it takes. Even, if we kind of like talk about, you can start with Atari at $50,000, that's still $50,000 more than that $1. And so I think brands should tap into as many channels as they can. I think it's totally logic that you start with those with limited investment, you scale them up. And what we typically see, especially in digital, is that brands max out, right? So all of a sudden the marginal cost, the cost to acquire just one more customer, let's say on Facebook, goes up all of a sudden very fast, almost exponentially. And TV then becomes very handy. TV actually fundamentally behaves differently. TV scales well. If something works on TV, let's say a network or publisher drives a performance, then you can easily expect to spend a lot of money on that. And so to really answer it, you should do all of it. The moment you seek scale, or the moment you kind of want to introduce that halo effect, a positive effect already on your digital channels, TV starts to make a lot of sense. I'll share one nugget of information with everybody here. So kind of like you can find your personal telltale. Anecdotally, I see when a company spends $200,000-$300,000 per month in Facebook prospecting, chances are that you can acquire customer at a lower marginal, I use marginal, not average, marginal cost.
Makes sense. How are you tracking performance metrics like CPAs?
Yep, I can answer that. I'll give you a break, Fleet. So yeah, we get full access to your GA and we drop our Pixel Tatari tracker on your site, and that's what allows us to calculate the deeper funnel metrics. You can have multiple events inside your Tatari tracker, like signed up for a newsletter, put something in checkout. We can measure all those. We have some clients that literally have 15 different events inside of the tracker. We'll measure all those.
Yeah, I'd say for mobile, so we are integrated with all the kind of the major mobile instrumentation platforms, right? Apps, Flyer, Kochava, Branch, you name it. You actually literally go into those platforms, select Tatari, and your data is automatically exported while you're on this call.
Great, and we have another question. Do you expect to expand Tatari's accessible inventory beyond traditional and streaming TV to digital video, example YouTube? Or how do you help clients figure out the balance between the two channels?
Yeah, that's a big one. Ultimately comes back to IP level data. So I'll point out one thing kind of before I give the full answer, is that the way in which we offer our measurement, and Skyler alluded to this, is always this concept of incrementality. When we measure TV, we only give TV credit when it was the single contributing factor to the visitor, the buy, the install, whichever it is. And so in that, it's not so much of kind of like a multi-touch attribution model, but you kind of really see the true isolated incremental impact from TV. So that's one. And then, so of course, we work with a lot of companies to give them view-through data so that they can see how TV relates to any of the other channels they have. We export this data in S3 buckets, either directly to the clients, or we deeply integrate directly with these multi-touch attribution platforms like Rockerbox, which we announced, I think, a few months ago.
Great. You mentioned 103K in spend for 1 month. What type of impressions are generated from this spend?
Sure. I mean, depends on what you buy, right? It's basic math. You can buy a lot of overnight airings at 20 cents CPM, and then you put one over the other, and then it's not necessarily a recipe that we will prescribe. You could do the very opposite, right? Buy very expensive $50 CPM. So look, every company is different. Depends on how you're going to tee off your streaming campaign. I'll tell this. Sometimes actually I heard that people feel that streaming inventory is expensive. I would somewhat disagree with that. You can buy excellent streaming inventory at $5-6 CPM. So you can do the math from there. So I just can't do it fast enough here, but that will tell you how many impressions you can drive out of that.
Great. Wow, questions are really streaming in. Are there specific verticals that this model works best for than others?
I can take that one, Fleet. Yeah, we have a wide range of clients ranging from fintech to telehealth to car rentals. Yeah, I can't call out which ones do the best, but TV can work for companies that have a smaller target demo, companies that are have a large target demo. We've seen it work at scale for a ton of them. We have over 120 brands today, and they're not all in the same category. So I'd have to hear the specific company, and you could write me offline, and I'm happy to chat with you more about your specific company if you wish.
Yeah, there have been instances where, yeah, we may actually recommend a company to hold off on TV, right? Try other channels first, right?
Okay, we have another question. How soon do you expect more dynamic TV advertising? Walmart, Vudu had been pushing dynamic shoppable ads. Now that Vudu has been sold, the only retailer video combination is Amazon. Do you expect more innovation around the TV ad unit in the near term?
Short answer is yes, and I would hope so. Always see that reality in light of what you need to scale. Right, so yes, those ad units, and people try new ad units. Creating a new ad unit, by the way, is incredibly difficult. I was at YouTube in the early days when there were like 30 people there, and when we tried to create our own ad units and try to sell them into the market, it takes a long time, and that often then means it takes a while before you can find sufficient scale. I'm all for it, testing new ad units, right? As long as you can take the client by the hand and teach them the ropes. The problem then, of course, is if it does work, it's really, really difficult to find $1 million worth of inventory the next week.
Great. Have you seen success for B2B companies, and can you give any examples?
Yeah, I mean, we get this question a lot, actually. Not just B2B, but let me in that kind of put just SMBs in general, right? Because of course now is the targetable audience is no longer 400 million Americans or the 150 million so households. Short answer is yes, and so I'll give a very simple example that will make it clear. So when I ran TrueCar and we focused on new car sales in the United States each year, about, I don't know where it is today, but say 10 to 11 million new cars are sold. That was our annual addressable market, no more. There are about 30 million SMBs in the United States. That market is even bigger than the car market, and yet there's so many automotive ads. So if you are an SMB or a B2B player, it absolutely makes a lot of sense. Don't forget, people who own businesses are watching TV as well. Okay, you can get to them very often with deep targeting and programmatic. Let's not forget that. And so holding back from TV because you're not in consumer is not a good reason.
Great. We have another question. When is the best time to engage with you? How much lead time do companies need?
Yep, I'll take that one, Philippe. Creative is always the bottleneck as soon as we have a creative, we can get you launched within days. We like to be very involved during that creative process. So it's not uncommon for a brand to join us 4 months before they're ready to launch, because we get really involved there and we guide them, make sure that their creatives are following our playbook. So totally fine to join us today if you're not going to launch until September, normal. Inversely, we have brands that signed yesterday that are going to be launching on Monday. So it can go both ways, but creative is always the bottleneck.
Do you do international?
So we do US and Canada. We get this question every day of like, who is the Tatari of the UK, of Germany? We're still trying to find them. When we do, we'll let you know, but we're focusing solely on US and a little bit of Canada right now.
Are we allowed to ask a question back? Who should people work with in the UK?
Yeah, ask the audience a question. I love that. Please type your answer in the chat box, audience members. Okay. There are no more questions. Well, there is one more question that we'll close things out with. If anyone has a burning last minute question, submit it now. But I'm sure you can follow up with Skyler and Philippe after this. We'll make that accessible. So as you two are serial entrepreneurs, what's next? It's a very open-ended question, but maybe you guys have an answer?
I feel like I've got my, no, actually, you go first, Skyler. Oh my goodness, yes.
I'm going to eat lunch after this.
That's great.
What about you, Philippe?
I don't know. I feel like I've got my work cut out. TV advertising, and it's fantastic, right? So TV advertising is a big industry, right? $70 billion plus. It's not going to go away, right? So for all the talk about streaming and new business models, it's not going to go away. And so it's also going through an incredible transformation. And I mean, I know there's many investors on this call, but that's the moment of excitement. My first company was Shazam, right? And so I started Shazam when the music industry cratered from $33 billion to $17 billion, just like that in 1 year. And they blamed piracy, whatever the reason was, but it created a lot of space for us to navigate in. Next company was TrueCar, 2008. And then of course in 2009, Detroit went belly up. Perfect, because now all of a sudden car dealerships had a good reason to talk to us. I feel a little bit the same about the TV industry. Obviously, it's not doing poorly. If anything, it's going through this golden decade. But in these fast transformations for startup companies, therein lies phenomenal opportunities for multiple players, by the way, to coexist and to do well. So I honestly like. And I'll stop ranting then, but like for those of you on the call who have heard of the mythical man month, right? I wish it didn't exist, right? Because we know exactly what we need to build at Tatari. And so if I had it my way, I would hire 500 engineers tomorrow, build it all in a month and be done. But unfortunately, that's not how it works. So short answer is we'll be doing this for a while. We have a great vision around this.